Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and zodiac forecasts for week beginning the 3rd of November. I'll share with you first of all some of the big themes of the week, then on screen the event chart. Right at the beginning of the week, how are the planets interacting? That's always influential for the whole 7 days. I'll then go through each of the influences in detail to give a clear overview of what we can collectively expect. Please stay with me. I'll then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. I have shared of late that over 50% of people who regularly watch these videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help the channel to continue to thrive and do so now. But please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. All your comments and likes are truly appreciated too. As we go into this week, we have been literally surfing a very watery and therefore emotional vibe of late, but it has had some real attributes, particularly if we've been able to embrace that more sensory undercurrent. But as we come into this week, there is some fiery vibes layered on top, not least with the position of the moon in Aries and Mercury in Sagittarius. But Mars, the planet of action, moves into Sagittarius too, and that's a very exciting change on Tuesday, but it's one that could ignite a lot of passion because it goes opposite the rather outspoken vibe of Uranus. What's the significance? But as the week goes on, we have a full moon in the sign of Taurus on Wednesday. That's an earthy energy. The moon actually loves being in the sign of Taurus. I'll explain why, and why this particular full moon could be very beneficial. But it is going to flag up any situation where we feel a bit too attached. It could be to some food choices, maybe some lifestyle choices, maybe around money or possessions, or even an intense relationship. And with Venus, the planet of relating, and the ruler of the sign of Taurus, moving into the deep Scorpio as the week goes on and clashing with the planet of power, Pluto, I feel that if there is something that we're involved with that's not necessarily good for us, particularly in terms of our future hopes, that could come up this week. And then Uranus, the planet which is very much to do with disruption, but also can push us to embrace new ways of doing things, inverts back into Taurus for one final pass through to the 26th of April next year in its entire 84-year cycle, which will complete next spring. So on the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart, and you can see the position of the moon in Aries, pretty close to the part of fortune, but they're linking back to Mercury very well. That's suggesting, despite that Grand Water Trine between Jupiter and Mars and Saturn, which has been so potent of late, and it's great to see Saturn and Jupiter on better terms because they have been going through that argument over the last 18 months, and we can still use that emotional energy because the sun remains in the deep transformational Scorpio. But because the moon in Aries is more about initiation and Mercury in Sagittarius is more about exploration, and with the arrival of Mars moving on from Scorpio and into the sign of Sagittarius, which occurs on Tuesday and through to the middle of December, that's going to give us a great deal of desire to break free of anything that may be too constraining. So I'm going to go through the influences in detail now, but if you would like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below. I'm sharing a few of the latest ones on screen now. Also, with year 2026 racing towards us, if you'd like to order your forecast for next year, totally unique to you, you can do so now. Get the rest of this year free, but also get 30% off together with my Life Roadmap report. That will give you searing insights to the patterns that have played out in your life so far, and an awareness of that together with your forecast will help you to plan your moves ahead really well. You also get your free Zodiac, Indian, Chinese and love written forecast for each zodiac sign for next year too, as a free gift. Please see below for more. And just to say, if you do click on a link and want to go to my website, you will get an alert message from YouTube. Now, please be assured my website has an SSL certificate. It's totally secure. I think YouTube are trying to keep people within YouTube. And please know it's absolutely fine to click out towards my website from YouTube. So, the big influences of this week does see that layer of fire. What is fire? Fire essentially is passion, and it is also about conviction, and it can be about action. So the moon being in Aries can in some ways be a little bit more innocent. It wants to get on the front foot. It's up for some kind of change, particularly having gone through a conjunction with Saturn and Neptune over the weekend. We may have felt really quite sluggish, maybe quite depleted in our energy, and at times feeling a little overwhelmed. So if we do feel a spark, why not embrace it? And the link with Mercury suggests that we can combine our feelings with our thoughts. That's a fine thing to do. Now, Mars normally going into Sagittarius would give us a tremendous appetite to be more adventurous, more physical, perhaps travel, certainly embrace our more freedom-loving credentials, because it has been going through that very intense journey through its home sign of Scorpio, which may have been stirring up a lot of issues, particularly around where we're most closely aligned with someone, perhaps intimately, perhaps financially. But because Mars goes into an instant opposition with Uranus, which really broadly goes on through to Saturday, I feel it's entirely possible that if we feel hemmed in or controlled, or it feels that someone's constraining us in some way, we could feel much more triggered in a very passionate way to break that, and very quickly. So it's a very energetic link. But of course we have the full moon on Wednesday, which is reminding us that sometimes the things that we may in some ways be attached to are actually quite good for us. They give us a sense of routine, of security. We don't necessarily get all of our needs met 100%, but that can be comforting energy because the moon in Taurus is exalted. And this is a full moon which forges a lovely link to the position of the North Node. So staying in touch with our instincts, even around practical matters, is a good thing. But because of Venus, the ruler of the sign of Taurus, moving into the deep Scorpio, where she is detrimented and squaring off to the power broker of the heavens in the latter part of this week, Pluto, if there is a situation, particularly around a friendship, a group activity, maybe a romantic situation where we do feel that someone is leveraging us, there is some control, perhaps manipulation, perhaps even jealousy. I think our instincts as this week goes on can be very much about reclaiming our power. And then on Saturday, Uranus makes that return back to Taurus. Not its favourite position, it's in its fore. And we've seen with Uranus in Taurus over the last 7 years a lot of issues to do with grabbing land, because Uranus can be about land, to do with the cost of agriculture and food, very Taurus, and also instability around the cost of living, but also the financial markets. So we could get a little bit more of that from now through to the end of April. But initially, I think it also reminds us that as much as we can have that freedom, we also need to be mindful of the practical realities of our situation. I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces next. Please stay with me for that. Aries, your week beginning the 3rd of November suggests that recently there's been a lot of emotional and very intense energy, with the moon having moved into your sign late on Sunday. That gives you a spark, but also Mars, your ruler, is about to move too on Tuesday, firing into Sagittarius, which can give you a taste for change. That old saying that change is as good as a rest could really call out to you in the early part of this week. But if there's a relationship that's been a little bit tense of late, maybe it has been around feeling a bit constricted, perhaps it's about different views around money, childcare, or just your tastes don't quite chime with theirs. One of the things you could be drawn to do this week is create space for yourself. Go off and do something that's totally on your terms because of Mars going face to face with the erratic Uranus. Now that's all good, but because of Chiron in your sign being opposite the planet of relating Venus on Monday, try to keep the lines of communication open even if you have been feeling frustrated, because the full moon that occurs on Tuesday does give you a reminder of the need for stability. Stability at times can seem a little dull for all of us, those daily patterns and routines, and also sometimes financial considerations can impact on what we might want to do as individuals. So as much as you could, do something much more spontaneous, dash in, book a travel plan, get together with some friends that you have a real connection with, as Mars links to the dynamic and planet of change Pluto. As the week goes on, there is still that vibe very much to do with your emotional connections, which is going to be rekindled by Venus moving into Scorpio to replace Mars. Now Venus is not that happy in Scorpio and immediately clashes with Pluto. If you do feel that your future hopes around a relationship are being stymied because someone just does have such different values to you, or you feel that you can't quite be yourself, it could show up in a very powerful way. But keeping things on an even keel at some level should be part of your consideration, because by the end of the week, as Uranus does invert back into your sector of everyday money, right through to the end of April, you may have to work again at recreating your financial situation in some kind of fresh way, because of course the world is changing at such a pace, whether it's through robotics, automation, AI, technology in general. And it may be that in recent years, particularly with Pluto going through Capricorn, that your professional situation has changed. So keeping things that give you some benefit, even if they don't necessarily feed your soul, and balancing that with the part of you that wants to be authentic, could be the juggle that this week serves up for you. But if you are a free spirit and you're able to do something more dashing, and head off somewhere and go somewhere that really gives you a buzz and helps you to break out, then good for you. It can be a very exciting thing to do after what was, towards the end of last week, really quite a lowering vibe. So Taurus, your week beginning the 3rd of November, is particularly exciting. The full moon on Wednesday is in your zodiac sign and can make you much more conscious about the relationships that you don't feel are quite working for you. Now, because Mars, the planet of passion, dives deep for you personally on Tuesday, it's possible that you could have an electric connection at the heart of this week with someone, and the full moon therefore could tease into the open an attraction as much as a dissatisfaction with an existing tie, because Mars moving into the 8th house is going to help you to decide between now and the middle of December, whether an existing relationship can get much more committed and devoted, or whether it may need to make way. And with Venus, your ruler, moving into your sector of relating, which can be very good for diplomacy, on the face of it, you have a window of opportunity over the next 4 weeks to bring some magic into a connection. But it does clash initially with Pluto. So if around perhaps a relationship with a parent or a boss, you feel that no amount of diplomacy seems to sway them, the fact that Uranus, the planet of rebelliousness, moves back into your zodiac sign towards the end of this week through to the 26th of April next year, that part of you that really evolved in recent years in terms of finding your voice, because you are peace loving, you do like stability, you do like continuity, you are a fixed sign, but in recent times you've been a lot stronger about asserting your needs, your boundaries, being more outspoken, and there could be more of that this week. So I think there could be a big connection to someone. You may need to speak up around a time that's not quite working for you, and you will find your voice if you need to. But Venus suggests if you can be diplomatic about making your points, that's helpful. But if that doesn't really make a mark, because someone is not really tuning into you, that's when you may feel that you do need to be that much more direct. Gemini, your week beginning the 3rd of November does see a switch of focus this week. Not completely, because right at the start of the week, the energy which has been manifesting of late has been very much to do with the tangible part of life, as long as you've been able to tune into it in a more instinctive way. So Mars has been in your 6th house, boosting stamina, attention to detail, giving you an appetite for hard work. It's linked to Saturn, helping you to solidify your efforts professionally or worldly connections wise. Jupiter, the planet of fortune, in the part of your chart to do with everyday money. So some kind of prize may have started to manifest itself towards the end of last week. But if it didn't, you can find with Mars moving on Tuesday that you want to go on the front foot, be much more combative about getting what you want from situations, particularly if you need to be competitive. So if you work in a fast moving arena and you need to test your mettle against others, you're going to be determined to do it right through to the middle of December. But Mars also goes face to face with Uranus, which has been in your zodiac sign since the 7th of July. It's going to invert out of Gemini later this week and back into your 12th house, where it will be through to the 26th of April. If there are any outstanding legacy issues, particularly in terms of your spiritual situation or your past experiences that are not quite worked out, they could show up in that time. But immediately the clash, whilst Uranus is still in your sign with Mars, could make you very outspoken if you don't feel that you're gaining the recognition and people are giving you the credit or the merit that you really deserve. So you could use Mars to assert your boundaries very, very firmly in the early part of this week. But because the full moon occurs in a very psychological area, the sun in a very practical area, if you do work somewhere where the vibes are not so good, perhaps in terms of the atmosphere, it may not be a place that you feel you can completely be yourself. With Venus the relator coming out of a fine part of your chart, which is very much to do with using your personality power to the max, you may have to, in some ways, work a little bit more subtly to deal with the politics of that situation. So as much as Mars can give you that fire, that thrust, as he arrives in Sagittarius, which incidentally, if you are looking to be more interactive around your love or social situations, is a great opportunity. But Venus replaces Mars, and if you're not feeling it quite at work, you could let someone know in that very direct way, but it may mean that that pushes the situation to a crisis point. And sometimes in life, a little bit of strategic of a strategic approach can actually be a very good thing. And I would say that's what Venus encourages. But it does clash with Pluto in a part of your situation which is to do with higher truths. Now, Pluto can be about what we can't necessarily see, so the way machinations are used out of sight. But for you, I feel that that square with Venus could make you a bit resentful if you feel you're having to work even harder around people that you don't feel that comfortable with. But there are undoubtedly some sub-strands in the mix this week you just need to be mindful of. So there is some more psychological draining energy there, some much more exciting go for it energy as well, and it's just being very attuned to what's going on in your particular situation. Because if you are feeling quite good with where you work, some kind of breakthrough can definitely be showing up, and you may find yourself pushed into the foreground in a way which can really give you a chance to shine. But Mars in the 7th house is definitely quite a robust location. So it's just handling the sensitivities of this week with another part of your nature that could be more immediately exasperated. But the big picture of Mars moving into your 7th house is definitely hopeful on the whole for the following 6 weeks. So Cancer, your week beginning the 3rd of November has recently seen the water energies of your zodiac sign, where you have in residence the mighty but magnificent Jupiter, has forged a brilliant link to Mars in a very playful, self-expressive area, but also Saturn in the part of your chart to do with knowledge. Now, they've all been working very collaboratively, but as last week came to a close, the moon passed over both Saturn and Neptune. If your soul purpose is not really being nourished as you come into this week, I think you may be more conscious of that. You can be pretty private at times about your emotional world, or at least very protected, but the moon's in a very visible location as this week begins, and then Mars, the planet of thrust, which has been pushing you to be more daring over the last 6 near to 7 weeks, switches into a much more pragmatic area where he's going to be through to the middle of December. I know it's late in the year and it's often a time when people get into the festivities, but Mars here could give you a taste for revising your diet, your exercise routine, or even your work. Mars can give you more stamina here, or at least more focused stamina, but it does go into an immediate and quite challenging opposition with Uranus. If there has been something that's been bubbling away in the depths that you're not completely happy with, it could suddenly come into the open at the heart of this week. And the full moon in Taurus, the moon loves being in Taurus, second only to your sign, exalted here, is also perhaps suggesting that you may need to toggle some of your energies and time and resources, because maybe more than one person wants quite a bit of you. It could be your kids, if you have them. It may be your social interaction and friends. It may be to do with your romantic situation. But because Venus, the relator, moves out of a more reflective area where she's been for about 4 weeks, later this week, and into a much more glamorous part of your scope, if you are wanting to reignite the fun and passionate side of your situation, a great way to do that could be to give yourself some kind of glam makeover. But Venus does clash immediately with Pluto, and if that desire for a soul purpose isn't working around your finances, and with Uranus moving back into your sector of your long-term future right through to the 26th of April next year, some kind of shift is possible around those group interactions or around your long-term aspirations. But what Uranus can also do is push you to get in touch with what your true higher purpose is. And sometimes that goes beyond the mundane. In other words, earning money, putting a roof over our heads, paying the bills. Those are all very worthy things and very necessary things. But you may find a more idealistic part of your nature starts to show up this week, and that's why I feel the full moon is going to push much more into the open and Mars can give you the focus and the drive to try and make some pragmatic and worldly decisions that work for that part of you that wants to be in touch with what really works for you at heart, at a heartfelt level. So Leo, your week beginning the 3rd of November has a fiery introduction, which is perfect for you being a fire sign. The moon's in the free-spirited Aries, but also on Tuesday Mars muscles its way into your 5th solar house. Mars in the 5th house can be very charismatic, it can be very action orientated around social interaction, perhaps even around your love life too, because Mars over the last near to 7 weeks has been in a very tender emotional area, which could have seen your moods somewhat up and down. Maybe you felt triggered a bit at times. But Wednesday does see the full moon, and it's a full moon that's in a very visible part of your chart. Many Leos like to at least guard your inner world, because how you're perceived by others is very important to you. You like to maintain your dignity, you like to be respected. You may find over the next 2 weeks that your emotions are a little bit closer to the surface, and one of the reasons for that is also because Uranus, the planet of surprises, is going to be inversing back into the sign of Taurus later in the week through to near to the end of April, the 26th. If there has been something you've tried different around your professional world and it didn't quite work out over the last 7 years, you may go through a further period of change or experimentation. But this full moon is also asking you to get the classic work-life balance right. And if you have been a little bit more preoccupied with personal issues, family life, making changes to your physical abode, it's just a bit of a reminder, the full moon and Uranus's return, that it is important to stay mindful of your connection to the wider world and how other people see you too. Now Thursday sees Venus on the move into the very deep, passionate Scorpio. Not Venus's best location, it has to be said, and it does also clash with Pluto. I think Venus moving into Scorpio for you, despite the energy that Mars is going to create in the sign of Sagittarius throughout the rest of the month, to be joined, it has to be said, by the Sun on the 23rd, that energy is very much more outgoing, interactive. Venus could give you an appetite to make some decorative changes to where you're living, but it can also stir up some very intense energies around a close relationship, maybe with someone within your family circle, maybe with a partner. So there could be some politics towards the end of this week, I feel, and Uranus moving back into your 10th house suggests that if you're not feeling completely happy, and the thrust of Mars as well in that fiery Sagittarius, the chances are you can be much more assertive about telling people how you feel as the week draws to a close. Virgo, your week beginning the 3rd of November begins with a fiery energy of the moon in the transformational 8th house for you of Aries. But that's linking to Mercury, your ruler, on Monday. And with Mars playing catch up with Mercury, moving into Sagittarius on Tuesday, over the next few weeks, where you live, how you live there, and who with are going to become very important to you. But if there is something you want to change about your home, your drive and determination to make this happen, particularly if you've got visitors for Christmas, is going to be very strong in the next few weeks, right through to the middle of December. But we do have a full moon, and that full moon on Wednesday occurs in your sister Earth sign of Taurus. The moon loves being in Taurus, it's exalted. For you, this is very much about your need to be a free spirit, to have variety in your life. And if you recall, since the middle of May 2018 for 5 months, and from March to 19 right through till the early part of July this year, Uranus, the planet of change, was in the part of your chart pushing you to be more adventurous and independent. Anything to do with novel travel destinations, changing things up in a more spontaneous way. Now, since the 7th of July, Uranus has been applying its influence in your sector of work, and you may have gone through a period of uncertainty about what you do. Now you're given the tools through to the end of April, the 26th of next year, to push through any changes you may want to make. But that can be counterintuitive for you, because your preference is for stability and very well refined structures and patterns of being. And that, in a way, can therefore, particularly with Pluto in your 6th house, Pluto the planetary change, the 6th house about those routines, if you're someone who really would prefer to stick rather than twist, you may find now, through to the end of April, that you are being pushed in some way or another to revolutionise your approach, which could feel a little bit daunting. So the full moon that occurs at the heart of this week could see you thinking or talking about your options. And you could have quite a few different options. It just depends whether you want to take the action to make them come to pass. Now, Venus, the relator, but also the planet of money, has been in a tremendous location for you over the last 4 weeks. It may have given you some surprise income perks. It may have seen you have a greater than ordinary appreciation of good food, but it moves into the part of your chart on Thursday, which is about your relating skills, and particularly on the back of that full moon, if there is something that needs to be discussed and you can find a more diplomatic approach, even if very sincere, that's probably going to be a good thing to do. But Venus does square off to Pluto, and that could see someone close to you deliver a message to you if they feel that you're resisting a change which actually would be quite good for you, and that could create a little bit of tension. So Mars moving to join your ruler Mercury in the 4th house could see your emotions a little bit up and down over the next few weeks. But what I do for you can do this week is think about or discuss your options, but particularly around trying to change your life up, make it more varied, and not being quite so adhered to a very rigid structure. So Libra, your week beginning the 3rd of November forecast sees the moon on Monday in your opposite sign, which is a great position to engage with others, because as last week came to a close right at the end of last week, late on Sunday, you may have felt quite a sense of responsibility, perhaps even a little bit burdened. But with the moon in Aries, linking to Mercury, the planet of communication and discussion, in a vibrant location, and then joined by the thrust of Mars on Tuesday, you can find yourself gaining confidence about expressing how you feel, getting on the front foot. You may also, over the next near to 7 weeks, find yourself much more physically active. You could be a little bit outspoken from Tuesday through to Wednesday. If you feel that someone hasn't really been listening to you, you'll want to cut through. We also have a full moon on Wednesday in the sign of Taurus, like yours, ruled by Venus. For you, this is very much about balancing the ins and outgoings financially, but you get a great celestial gift when Venus, your ruler, switches into the sign of Scorpio on Thursday, and over the next 4 weeks can bring you some surprise but very positive good news when it comes to your everyday income. It does meet an initial roadblock in the guise of Pluto. If there's someone you're involved with and you just don't seem to align around your values, or your generosity or thoughtfulness is not really received and appreciated in the way you would like, that can be a bit of a sticking point. But with the erratic but outspoken energies of Uranus returning to the part of your scope to do with shared finances, right through from the end of this week to the 26th of April, if you have got some innovative or bold ideas, particularly that are more entrepreneurial, those can come back into focus in the interim. So this is a week where you may need to look at the ins and outgoings around your finances, but there can be a boost. I feel you're going to be much more self-assured about expressing yourself, and if you have felt a little bit weary as last week came to a close, there's much more energy about this week that you can embrace in a positive way. Scorpio, your week beginning the 3rd of November forecast sees a week full of action and it does include your two rulers. Mars, your traditional ruler, makes its way out of your sign and into Sagittarius on Tuesday, but it does go immediately opposite the energies of Uranus. You might find yourself minded to be a bit more impulsive about a spending decision. But also, Mars is going to forge a very powerful link to Pluto, initially your modern ruler. And Pluto will feature later in the week as Venus arrives in your sign. But that link between Mars and Pluto creates an awful lot of thrust, determination, but critically desire. If you're wanting to change something around your home, for example, that may be where you get the impulse to splash that cash. But we do have a full moon on Wednesday, and that brings sharply into focus relationship issues, but perhaps not as you see it. If you've been very focused on what's important to you of late, and it wouldn't be a surprise with Mars being in your sign along with Mercury and the Sun, someone may suggest over the next couple of weeks that you've been too single-minded, too focused, and therefore not as available as you could be for them. But perhaps, to be honest, Scorpio, you've been in deep thought about a particular relationship and feeling that it might be at a bit of a crossroads. With Venus, the planet of relating, arriving in your sign on Thursday, it's an opportunity to draw a line in the cosmic sand. You'll move much more into the present. If you have been thinking about someone from your past, reminiscing, or there has been a breakdown in a tie, a separation, or you've been more mindful of the more sensitive side of a relationship, I feel you're going to be much more in the mood to engage, and the full moon could push you, along with Venus and Mars moving, to have that key conversation. But Venus does square off to Pluto, your modern ruler. So the second time of the week it features, and that suggests if the way you see something is very different to someone else, it could create a lot of tension. It may even be with someone in your family. Now later in the week, Uranus inverts back into the sign of Taurus, your relationship sector, where he was until the 7th of July, from the early part of March 2019, and may have brought lots of changes, insights, perhaps even unpredictability around certain involvements in the interim. And from now through to the end of April, that energy can show itself again. So I feel Venus moving into your sign is a great opportunity to refresh your personal image, to get on the front foot if there has been a parting and you want to re-engage with others. But it also can be a time to get the dialogue going, and with Uranus moving back into your sector of relationships, Uranus is a truth seeker, and it could see that part of you that can be quite bold and to the point, opening up. So after a period of keeping some of your relating cards closer to your chest, or being very focused on your individual pursuits, you're going to be much more in the mood to get the conversations going as this week goes on. So Sagittarius, your week beginning the 3rd of November, has great news. Mars, the planet of thrust, action and desire, arrives in your sign on Tuesday after having made its way through a very tender part of your chart for the previous 6 or so weeks. Mars in the 12th house, where it has been, can stir up lots of unexpected emotions and in unpredictable ways. Mars in our own sign brings us into the moment. You can take a firmer grip on your life direction. Your energy and confidence will improve. Mars also forges an immediate link to Pluto. If there's something you want to say, you can say it with real conviction. But also you may find that part of you that can be quite outspoken is very much to the fore because of Mars's immediate opposition with the electric energies of Uranus at this point of the week in your sector of relationships. So you're going to be much more back in your normal mode of being. But there is a full moon which occurs on Wednesday, and it is in a very practical location, the 6th house. The moon here is asking you to grapple with over the next couple of weeks, trying to ensure that your routines are as organised as possible, because that could have an impact on how you feel in a more energetic way. because the Sun is in your 12th house and is joined by Venus on Thursday, there's still a very psychological dimension playing out in your situation. If you're not really feeling it around a romantic relationship, you may find over the next 4 weeks from Thursday that you go into a big review, soul searching. There could even be a complete ending if a tie is truly bumping along the bottom. But equally, you could find yourself being much more nostalgic for someone from your past, and that can bring up some very powerful memories. You may even look someone up on social media to see how they're doing. But whatever you do with Venus in the 12th house, it is a time to give yourself permission to process more sensitive energies, just when Mars is going to make you much more vigorous and much more in that mode of breaking out, being much more dynamic, taking physical action. So there's a bit of a juggle this week between staying in touch with that tender side of your being and moving into the moment, and then with Uranus inverting back into Taurus as the week draws to a close, through to the 26th of April next year, if there are still some areas of your life that aren't running quite as smoothly as they could, and maybe do still need some extra attention to revise and review them, Uranus is asking you to be as open-minded as possible about that whole process, including the type of work you do. Capricorn, your week beginning the 3rd of November forecast is going to see the powerful energies of Mars move into your 12th house on Tuesday. Now, Mars moving here for the next near to 7 weeks does have some possibilities. The 12th house can be the more shadow side of our lives, the parts of our situational personalities we can be a little bit reluctant to grapple with. Things like our fears, anxieties, past issues that caused us upset or loss. And Mars is asking you to use the thrust of Mars to engage with those things, not ignore them. If you do try to ignore them, the problem is they can tend to come up anyway, but in a less managed way. And of course, Mars can be a little bit of a volatile influence. Once Mars moves into your sign mid-December, you really will benefit from the hard work you do between now and then, if there are some old things that you do need to look at and let go of. But this week also sees a full moon in the very sociable 5th house, in an opposition with the Sun in the 11th house, and then you have Venus arriving to replace Mars in the 11th house on Thursday. So you can still enjoy some social opportunities over the next few weeks. The possibility is with Mars in the 12th house, you're going to become much more conscious of who's really invested in you. So some fair weather friends could show up, but also may need to make way. It's a full moon which asks you to manage your time carefully. You know, if you feel your long-term plan, the Sun in Scorpio, is not really reflecting the full range of your talents, Uranus inverting back into Taurus on the back of that full moon there later in the week, it's just reminding you that doing things differently, being very inventive or innovative, or embracing technology in some ways, is something that does give you a window of opportunity right through to the end of April. And if you reflect right through to March 2019, you have shown a lot of very smart moves and have challenged that view that you're someone who will be very orthodox in your approach. So there's more to come from you in terms of expressing your genius, your brilliance and your creativity, and this week certainly encourages you to do that, but just stay mindful of that emotional subterranean energy that Mars could have a tendency to stir up over these coming weeks. Aquarius, your week beginning the 3rd of November forecast gives you an opportunity to showcase a very unique part of your nature. Over the next near to 7 weeks, your ability to collaborate and yet still retain your individuality is going to be boosted hugely as Mars makes its way through the friendliest but most independent zodiac sign for you of Sagittarius. So those connections, those networks are really going to become very vivid. But also we have a full moon on Wednesday in a very tender area, the 4th house. It's important whatever we're doing in life, whether you're attention at the moment is very much to do with goals and ambitions, all those more social opportunities to stay in touch with how things feel. In fact, your modern ruler, Uranus, is inverting back into Taurus later this week. If you have encountered some disruption around where you live, who you live with and how, ever since May 2018, it really wouldn't be a surprise. And there could be a little bit more to come before now and the end of April. But all the knowledge that you've gained in the interim about your need for space, to be authentic, to just be close to people that really celebrate your uniqueness, you can deploy that in a very ample way over that period of time. But Venus, the planet of relating, does move to replace Mars on Thursday and climbs right to the top of your chart, and does initially clash with Pluto in your sign. That part of you that can be very progressive, very cutting edge, but also traditional, could compete with how you need to present yourself, because an opportunity to make progress in your work over the next 4 weeks can come from diplomacy, and you can raise your profile, particularly if you're a creative, in a very positive way with Venus's help. But you may have to, in some ways, just bend in a bit to the expectation, especially if you do work in a big organisation. But that's where Mars in Sagittarius, along with Mercury, is going to be such an asset. Your ability to interact, share ideas, retain who you are, but also understand what's required, and try to support others in what they're trying to do, is something that people are going to truly recognise. So a more friendly, sociable time is ahead, but when it comes to your work, make sure things feel right. You give yourself some downtime for your emotional needs, but certainly your personality power and skills as a diplomat is going to be very much to the fore over the next few weeks. So Pisces, your week beginning the 3rd of November forecast sees that Grand Water Trine, which is manifested recently so positively, still in play. Saturn in your sign, structures. Jupiter, your traditional ruler, in the most flamboyant part of your chart, Cancer, and Mars in the part of your chart, Scorpio, that's to do with expansion and being very bold. And that just gives you a foundation. But you know, it's still encouraging you to stay in touch with your feelings. But Mars then moves later on Tuesday into the most prominent part of your whole chart. Over the next near to 7 weeks, if you have felt somewhat stymied in general over the last 18 months, perhaps 2 years, by Saturn's presence in your sign, reducing your vitality or your enthusiasm, or you've had to limit your life in some ways, now you can feel the flame of desire is relit, but particularly around ambitions, goals, and targets. And you can push forwards with a lot of conviction and self-assurance over those weeks. But you know, you can use Mars to change any part of your existence, because I feel change could still be something that appeals to you. And the full moon, which occurs at the heart of this week, could see you have some important conversations, do some key research, even get some very positive advice. But it's the arrival of Uranus, the planet of change, back into your 3rd house later this week, and Venus, the relator, moving into your sector of freedom and higher truths on Thursday. All of this creates quite a lot of interaction, discussion and thinking. But I feel that what Mars does, that's going to help to draw off that energy and see you take action. So whether you want to change around your work, start your own enterprise, start a side business, whether you want to be more self-assured about learning something or teaching or sharing skills you have, the conviction that Mars gives you over these coming weeks is really going to be something to behold. But there may be some disruption if you do start to go through a change process. And with Uranus reversing back into Taurus through to the end of April, you get another window of opportunity to embrace novel ideas, innovation, and that can be a little bit unsettling. But if you have got a very key idea that you want to push forwards with, you can do so with a great deal of confidence, thrust and self-assurance from Tuesday onwards. If you would like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below. I'm sharing a few of the latest ones on screen now. Also, with year 2026 racing towards us, if you'd like to order your forecast for next year, totally unique to you, you can do so now. Get the rest of this year free, but also get 30% off together with my Life Roadmap report. That will give you searing insights to the patterns that have played out in your life so far, and an awareness of that together with your forecast will help you to plan your moves ahead really well. You also get your free Zodiac, Indian, Chinese and love written forecast for each zodiac sign for next year too as a free gift. Please see below for more.